Giant stalker, dragon stalker, crypt stalker, demon stalker, rift stalker, grown stalker, crypt stalker, scourge stalker, wind runner. I'm a pony, lead skill hunter, a death dealer, a life stealer. That's just the cost of being.
Welcome to episode 150 of the Hunting Party Podcast. This is Euripides from WoW Insider, OTPS, and Call to Auction.
And I'm Dark Brew from thebrewhall.com and the Brew Hall on Twitter.
Frostheim is... Oh,
hey.
Go ahead.
And I'm Molly Sonder from the Hunting Party Podcast, because Frostheim's not here because his sister's in town.
Yes, I agreed that that it had been long enough, and I paid her plane ticket to go down and see Frostheim, because of course she lives with me normally. But anyway.
Right.
And that's that. Somebody had to make that joke.
Absolutely. Yeah, it'll be the sister joke, and it'll be a hairy wrist day for the outro, I suspect, too.
Oh, yes, of course.
And speaking of today is Saturday, November the 10th, 2012. And if you want to participate in the chat room and aren't registered, or even if you are registered today we'll just have you just do a /salute veterans in the chat window, and you'll be prompted, because tomorrow, at least here in the United States, is Veterans Day, where we sort of pay homage and our respects to all the men and women in our military who serve our nation for all the wars and things we fought in our history, including that War of 1812, where we tried to bring Canada from the dark side to the light side, but...
I will have you know that it is indeed also in Canada. We don't call it Veterans Day. We call it Remembrance Day. And up here, it's really, I mean, obviously it's basically the same thing, but there's a lot more focus placed on World War II, in particular some of the particularly devastating battles that Canada fought, like during D-Day and stuff like that. And there's everybody wears. Do you guys do the red poppies down there?
Yes, and so does England.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's a big thing up here. But as it falls on a Sunday this year, we won't. There won't be a lot of people sort of out and about. But any year that it falls on a weekday, every single job I've been in, they always have a moment of silence at exactly 11:11 on November 11th. So, alas, that's not today. So we won't put a moment of silence into the podcast. At least not on purpose.
We're not on purpose. Yeah. Whether or not there'll be if there's a moment of silence, it's because we've run out of things to say, or there's a technical glitch of some kind.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That's
right.
Okay. I'm prepared to read the names in the chat room very slowly.
Oh, God. Speaking of which, our lovely moderator, as always, is Ali Sonder. And if you have a question that you want us to answer for the Q&A section, or any other comment you want to make, you can send her a private message by clicking on her name, and she will rank your questions in the order that they get asked based on your answer to the following question.
You're not going to have the same question I do.
You know what? You pick the question today. I was about to make
to know
another
what
Frost
everybody's
Sister
doing,
jokes.
because everybody's really tired with dailies. Everybody's doing dungeons and doing raids and maybe pet battles. So I'm curious, just what is everybody actually doing? Or are they just not doing anything, taking a break?
You know what? Let me ask you this then. We were talking about this just before the show. Why don't we make the question that you judge the orders based on their answer? What would you be doing if you didn't have to do dailies?
Yeah.
That sounds
and
like
by
a
the way,
good question.
I don't think we'll ever not have to do dailies with the way they've designed it. Even when you think you're done doing dailies, there'll always be a reason to go back and do dailies. And getting Valor capped is one reason in and of itself, I would think, that you sort of be forced to do dailies.
That's true. Okay, in the chat room we have Bellasky, BM Jager, Xiaomi, Dome Splitter, Alapide, Ember Malganis, Foxtrap 05, Gobao, Havtora, Hulk. Is that? Yeah, Hulk. Hot Shotgun, Leylowin, Morgatho, Oxander, Rhino Banya, okay, Rhino Banya, Showa Hunter, Syndra the Hunter, Slugslinger, Solar Knight, Steerheart, Stone Tempest, Tagurit, Warvini, Zudomus, and we hosts. Thank you.
Hi, Banya. So we have some news that we should probably go over. And before we get down, well, I guess there's two items here on the news. Do you want to go through the first one, Dark?
Yeah, let's talk about this. This is, again, related to patch 5.1, which is still in testing on the PTR. They had another set of changes this past week, and we saw another change to Link's Rush, and unfortunately, it's been nerfed again. So now the It's the tooltip on it says your pet rapidly charges from target to target, attacking 9 times over 4 seconds. Each attack now causes the target to bleed for 330 damage over 15 seconds, down from 465. So they reduced the damage on this ability yet again.
Okay. And let me just think here. Right now on live, it hits them. It doesn't make them bleed. It makes them. It just damages them, right?
Right now, it's just like a real bursty damage. Kind of. I think it's still over 9 seconds, but it just bounces from target to target and just inflicting a whole bunch of damage
9 times over
right
4
away.
seconds. Yeah.
Right.
And if I remember correctly, you can use your pet's other attacks while it's like you can kill command while it's doing a Link's Rush.
I believe so. I've tried that, and that seems to work and doesn't interrupt the spell or anything like that. So yes, you can still cast like kill command when you're doing that.
All right. So I mean, this is a slight nerf, but the fact that they've gone to a bleed is an indication that this is too strong in PvP. I don't think it matters if you're just planning on doing PvE or raiding, because whether it's bleed damage or upfront damage, just so long as it gets done to the boss, that's the important thing. However, I think that this bleed... Now, let me ask you this other thing. In the past, we've had marksman abilities that gave us extra damage on our bleeds. Is that something that... I haven't touched marksman since patch 5.0. Is that something that still exists? Do we get a bleed accelerator if you're marks?
I want to say yes, and I'm going to go try and do a quick look up right now because I think we still have piercing shots. Well, that causes the target to bleed for 30 seconds.
On a crit, yeah.
Yeah.
No, you know what? It's right. No, it was never an increase. There was a debuff. That's what I was getting confused with. There's a pet debuff or a class debuff that you can use to increase the damage of your bleeds, and that's why marksman was stacked up so nicely in other patches. So, okay,
right.
Yep, in that case,
so I don't think this benefits marksman in any real way. Although we talked about last week, they did try and do couple things to buff up marksman, but I don't know that it'll be enough to make people want to switch over there. Or it's just such a weird thing. And I think Frost even wrote about it a little bit this week in his Scattered Shots column, where the theory and the practice for marksmen are very different. they paint a very different picture of that spec right now, whereas the theory has it much closer in line with the others, which corroborates with what Blizzard has been saying about it. But in practice, it doesn't seem to be the case.
Yeah. Well, I guess class balance is probably more important than spec balance, and as long as we have a spec that can perform really decently in raids, then I'll be happy.
And we seem to have 2 right now.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say I'd be even more happy if we had 2, extraordinarily happy if we had 3, and even more happy if we only had 2 and one of them wasn't BM. No, I should clarify that. I had an alternative to BM, as I don't dislike it. It just... I kind of dislike it. It's just it doesn't suit my playstyle because there's so much, worrying about your pet. And you can never see him because he's always underneath there, and if he dies, you're basically screwed. And sometimes you're sitting there hammering on abilities that should work and they don't. Like kill command gets you just a little bit too far or something like that. So there's a variety of things that I don't like about BM, but I'm happy just so long as we have at least one that's capable of topping the meters. That said, right now I don't think we do. I know we briefly touched on this. And they said that in 5.1 they're going to be nerfing some of the guys who are really out of line. Like I think fire mages were brought up as being too high. But in terms of like the spec score for BM and survival right now, it's right in the middle of the pack. And I think hunters should always have one that's at least sort of top, within a few percent of the top, and that's not the case right now. So
no, it's not, and it's not so bad that you wouldn't, not take a hunter into a raid. It's not like that level, but it certainly seems middle of the road. And depending on the class that you're up against. I mean, I see, at least with our guild, we have a mage that's just doing crazy amounts of damage, and it's very hard to keep up with him. We don't even really come close, and it's just it's a huge disparity, really.
What's hard is to keep up with half of them. If you can keep up with half of them, then you're doing your job as a hunter. But even then, I mean, we accelerated in AoE. If they gave us more fights that required extremely high AoE amounts of damage, then hunters would have the ability to top the charts on some encounters. And I'm not saying that I want our pure raid dummy DPS to be at a certain place, because I know that's not how they designed it. But I would like to see hunters have at least a couple of encounters where they are really sort of the best to bring, and they will always top the meters unless they screw up, kind of thing. And the other thing I would like to see is Well, the one mitigating factor is that this expansion, more than any other, we have a huge versatile toolkit that we can bring to the raid in terms of buffs and debuffs. We have a battle res that we didn't used to have. Our major spec, or the primary spec that most people tend to run if they're trying to do competitive progression, is Beast Mastery, which has Heroism, which is not necessarily always going to be there. Well, I mean, there's a lot of other classes that have it now too. But the point is, the hunter has a very diverse toolkit that they can bring. So, and that is an advantage, and that's one of the nice things about playing a hunter. But it'd be nice to have the pure damage too.
Yeah, it is nice about hunters, especially the buff thing, because that way you can actually consider bringing more than one hunter, even into a 10-man, and know that you're not necessarily going to be missing out on buffs, depending on what other classes you have with you. Because each hunter can bring at least 2 distinct buffs via their pets, and that's kind of big. You don't necessarily get that with other classes. If you bring 2 balanced druids, for example, you're stuck with whatever the balanced druids have. With 2 hunters, you can bring whatever buff you're missing, and you're going to be much more likely to have all 8 of the buffs, debuffs, etc. But than you would with bringing other classes. So that's one of my favorite aspects about it, at least with this expansion now.
Yep. So going back to Link's Rush, this is a nerf that is squarely aimed at PvP, and I suspect overall balance. I'm not on the 5.1 PTR, but if I were, and I had the ability to just generate a raid of characters that played perfectly and set them against the target dummy, I suspect that Hunters might have been too far ahead with Link's Rush the way it was at 465 for that bleed. But in any case, regardless of the actual number, the change of the mechanic now being a bleed instead of direct damage is clearly aimed at PvP. And I know for a while that Hunters in Arena had a variety of things going for them, one of which is that there was a key nerf that we talked about last week that was not being applied to them, which is when they stampede, all the pets were not getting the debuff that they get in the real world. And of course, the other one is you could Link's Rush and then stampede and then kill command and then rapid fire and then Bestial Wrath, and it was just overwhelming. 2 Beastmaster Hunters like that with any other class would be basically unstoppable. So, and that's not the environment that they like for PvP. Although we always seem to get it right at the beginning of each expansion. I remember right in the beginning of Cataclysm, marksmanship with aim shot was like ridiculous. If you could hard cast an aim shot on someone, you'd basically win. And that was something that did not last long. They did nerf it down into a point where it was still good, but not ridiculously good. And I suspect that that's what's going on here, and we'll have to see where Hunters land in this season.
Yeah, and no one seems to be complaining about the knockback ability and things with Explosive Trap. I guess that looks like that's working out okay. I saw, who was it? It might have been Kripparrian did an actually funny video. It wasn't Arenas, but he was maybe on a PvP server or something, but just flying around certain areas with Horde flagged, and he'd put him in an ice trap and then put the Explosive Trap with the knockback right next to him, and then you just see this block of ice go flying off a cliff and plunging to their deaths, and it's just
absolutely, yeah,
very amusing stuff, And I'm just wondering, and as far as I can tell, Blizzard seems to be okay with these types of mechanics, like they're not going out of their way to change that.
Yeah, this is a classic example of misdirection. Everybody was so upset that we could just raffle own people in Arenas 2s and 3s that they forgot the fact that we have this ability that everybody's been just abusing to amazing effect. Like one of the skills that you needed to learn in past expansions is scatter trapping, right? Scatter shot, drop a trap, and then that was that. Scatter trapping is not as easy to do with an explosive trap because where they fly is going to depend on where they are when the trap activates. And if you scatter shot them and then place your explosive trap right in the middle, they could go the wrong way. But yeah, you can scatter trap. You can scatter shot, ice trap, and then when that ice trap's about to run out, use your explosive trap to blow them off something. And just what, I would be willing to just completely give up arenas and competitive PvP. Period. If I was on a PvP server with explosive trap and the glyph camouflage, I wouldn't need the gratification of a rating or gear. I mean, you can have a level 90 hunter in greens who can walk up to someone in camo and then freeze them and then blow them off a cliff someplace, or just do it in battlegrounds. I mean, I don't care about winning anymore. This is the end. This is not a means. This is an end. But maybe that's just me. I mean, I've been over enthusiastic about this blowback for a while now.
Yeah,
And
it's a very cool ability, and it's not something I think players are used to seeing from hunters.
no,
And so I don't know that
it's so
everyone's.
much fun.
I think folks are still probably adjusting to this to some degree.
Yep, and power shot is another one I have to play around with. I like the idea of power shotting somebody right over a cliff. And that would be Dark Brew's phone ringing. But anywho, so let's go on to the next issue here. These are some tweets and blue posts. Question: Hunters are upset that Scattershot can be dodged, while Blind is on a 1-minute cooldown, but it can't be dodged. What can be made of this disparity? And the answer is Hunters and Rogues have completely different tool sets that complement each other differently. Making a side-by-side comparison between class abilities is a good way to become unnecessarily frustrated. Scattershot behaves the way it does by design. It is a ranged attack and is intentionally subject to being dodged. Okay, I know why they're asking this. In PvP, it's not like PvE. In PvE, if you expertise cap, dodge goes away. It costs you 7% of, that's itemization you could have put into haste or crit or something, but that is indeed all you have to do. And then you'll never see the word dodge again, unless there's some sort of weird boss mechanic or you forgot to do it. In PvP, that is not the case. You never scattershot, very rarely scattershot in raiding or 5-mans or whatever. You're going to scattershot all the time in PvP, and if you are going up against a class that has defensive cooldowns that are not complete immunity, i.e. not a bubbled paladin, you're going up against, I don't know, a rogue or a feral druid or something like that, and you need to land a trap. Landing a trap means landing a scattershot, placing a trap, and then, crossing your fingers that the trap doesn't get resist, although I don't think that actually happens anymore. But all of that said, if your scattershot is dodged, that's a long cooldown that you have to wait before you're able to effectively trap again. Now, I would actually argue that this does make our crowd control a little bit less efficient, but I would also argue that we have things that compromise or that compensate us a little bit for this. For example, we can still place traps at our feet. And landing a scatter trap has never been a sure thing. First of all, as soon as somebody sees a scatter shot in an arena, somebody comes and covers it. Like as soon as your healer starts wandering around disoriented, the job of the DPS, melee or ranged, is to stand where the healer's standing and try and get the trap. That's called leading a trap. Second of all, really good players know to trinket the scatter and then just move out of the way of the trap. And additionally, I'm not sure if that's actually still the preferred, but anyways, that is something I've seen happen quite a few times. It is, of course, funny when they trinket the scatter and land in the trap, of course. But, the other one is you can use Hand of something, Sacrifice or whatever, something that is, if you get scattered and you know that you're about to get trapped, usually there's a way either to keep it up sort of on cooldown so that it's timed with the hunter's CC mechanic or something, but just basically some ability that forces you to take damage even if your opponents aren't directly damaging you, and that'll break everything. That'll break your scatter shot, that'll break a trap, at that point it no longer matters. So I guess what I'm saying is the fact that certain classes can dodge us it's not a good thing, but it's not like it doesn't mean that this is so much nerfed that we can't use it anymore. It just means that expertise is going to be something that you can't afford to stack for PvP because it would cost you too much pressure or survivability or something. But you can you'll certainly get a benefit from it, especially against teams that have ferals or rogues or somebody with a really high agility.
Yeah, and again, this is just a question that people have about the way the ability works now. This isn't something that they're nerfing or changing to scattershot. It's just the behavior of the shot, and all Blizzard's really done here is sort of confirm that, yeah, this is how we want it to behave. Yeah, this is what we've done.
And they know we scatter trap, but I don't think that they intended those to be used as the same word. We scatter trap as one word. That is an action. You scatter shot someone, you place a trap. And that's not an advanced technique. That's something that you're supposed to be able to do as a hunter if you want to PvP at all, anywhere. However, extremely good hunters, and if you go and look at the arena YouTube videos that are out there for some of the extremely good hunters, they do this quite a bit, but it's not the only way that they use traps. Like, sometimes the best place to put a trap is by your feet without a scatter. Because if you scatter, you're telling the healer, you're about to get trapped. 3 seconds. You got 3 seconds, and you're currently blinded. You're about to get trapped. Sometimes the best thing to do is just put it down on the healer while he can't move. You don't even need to scatter them. So, and anyways, I'm not pretending to be an extraordinarily gifted PvPer. I've done a fair bit in other expansions. I certainly haven't done any yet this expansion, but I suspect that this is not as bad as people think. I mean, it's going to make it so that you need to have a little bit more skill to continue to land your traps. It's going to make it so that even if your skill is high, the number of traps you're going to land is going to go down compared to where it was last expansion. But we have other stuff to compensate for that. You have to look at the class design as a whole before you start making too many judgments on individual abilities or combinations of abilities.
Yeah, I mean, so makes sense. The other thing I want to just make a comment generally about patch 5.1. I don't know how close they are to getting this to release. I suspect it's still going to be a ways out that they would at least want the final raid instance to open up before they even release it. But, I mean, it doesn't look like they're going out of their way to at least buff survival or BM in any way. And so I'll be curious to see. I mean, it just looks like we talked about hunters being kind of middle of the package DPS wise, and it looks like we might be that way at least until the next tier.
Well, of course, the other thing to remember is that our gear changes each tier, right? Yes. I mean, 5.1 is not changing anything that drastic, but certain specs benefit more from certain gear than others. For example, I remember the slow but steady progression of marks in the past where, really all that changed from patch to patch was the eye level of the weapons that we could get. But eventually that made it such a big deal that we just, marks became the de facto standard. And I suspect that that's still the case. If I haven't checked marks in a long time because I know it's not quite there yet, and I don't want to be the guy breaking the mold and trying to do something that most other people tried and didn't work. But that said, I'm pretty sure that if I were to run the numbers through an accurate simulator or the female dwarf or the spreadsheets or something like that, I would find that the DPS value of ranged weapon attack power or ranged weapon DPS is probably still much more important to marks than it is for the other ones, just because of the nature of the damage that they do. And I suspect that because of this, we would see a natural alignment towards, or a natural progression of marks towards from wherever they are towards being a little bit better than wherever they are. Whether that ever puts them past the next guys, I don't know, but we'll have to watch.
Yeah, most definitely. And I'm trying to look one thing up real quick. It just
while you do that,
I thought there was it may have just been a tooltip thing. There was a note a week or so ago about Wild Quiver, and I'm not sure what they've done to change that. Other than it's something about there was this note saying it like deals ranged weapon damage, but I thought it already.
Yeah, I thought it already did. It's your attack
already
power,
did that now, so. Or
it's like have an auto attack pick, basically. That's the way I've always calculated it.
Right. So, but I remember seeing it on MMO Champion, and it was like I didn't quite understand what the nature of that particular patch note, but I'll have to.
Okay, well we'll have to keep an eye out for that. If they do change Mark's Mastery, that would be a very simple way to tweak and that's why they said they wanted to change Mastery to the way it is now. Is that way they have the opportunity to tweak one spec at a time. So if they change, I don't know, the scaling or something of Wild Quiver, that would right there potentially put marks up someplace.
Yeah, I remember they did that in beta. I mean, it was higher in beta, and I believe it was Zahara who pointed out that basically that even in this tier that marksman could basically stack all kinds of mastery and really make that overpowered, which is part of the reason why it is where it is now. So.
Yeah, and that's the problem. If you ever have anything that doesn't scale linearly or even logarithmically, then that's something that you'll see. Like back in the armor pen days. We're dating ourselves now, but back when you could just stack armor pen, and at first it sucked, but eventually, man, did it ever kick butt.
Yeah, and I don't know if there was a cap to Wild Quiver, whatever it was. It was going to be conceivable to basically load up on mastery and essentially maximize. That ability out of marksman, and was just going to be crazy overpowered. So they changed the numbers based on sort of that theory. So I'm not sure that they'll tweak that, if that's an area that they'll look at.
Fair enough. So do you want to do some listener Q&A?
Sure.
I got some Q&A and some emails here.
Yeah, we do. Nice for a change.
Yeah. All right. The first guy's making fun of me, so I'll read it. Zodomus? All right, I got something to ask the Hunter Trifecta. Have they found an even more perfect, super pink, pretty princess outfit for Euripides? I guess to answer the question, and I'm not necessarily proud of it, but I haven't even been playing it all this expansion. I played up until release, and then I quit. However, I still tune in to listen to the show. Wow, I'm confused, but happy for. I suppose we can be entertaining, and it's a good way to keep up on the best class ever of any game. However, yes, it's funny. I've actually seen a lot of people come back. I know there are people who've left, obviously, with any expansion, but I've seen a lot of old names. Do you remember Jason Mora, Druid of the Moon?
Yes,
he had a blog. Yeah, yes. He started posing again. He's raiding with a Horde Guild on our realm.
Yeah, I remember he sort of transferred over to Horde sometime last expansion, and but he hadn't been posting much at all last expansion. But yeah, I saw that he was back. That Druid of the Moon was a lot more active than it had been.
Yeah, it's rare, but that guy's really skilled.
Yeah, and if anyone from Blizzard is listening, like Ghostcrawler or just someone, and you're thinking of ideas, to honor players and put in-game items, I think Yuri's pretty princess outfit would be the way to go to put in for you. No. Just make it male, and or maybe just for pure transbog purposes or whatever.
Male with intellect on it, yeah. No, I'm almost positive that nobody from Blizzard will hear that. But and I that would suck. So where was he going with this? Oh, was he here in the pre-show? Maybe you heard me talking about how I was sitting at the princess table again. Mm-hmm. That must have been it.
I believe so.
Okay. All right, you want to get the next one?
Yeah, the next one's from Mo Tiu or something. He says, our haste levels, he wants to know if Hunter's haste levels are ever going to rise. His is like 10.40, and he says his eye level is 373. I'm wondering if he means 473.
I'm assuming he means 473.
I think probably 473, yeah.
The haste levels will rise as the gear rises, or you could just respec into it, I suppose. Not respec, reforge into it.
Yeah, I don't know quite. I think even Frost wrote about this. Said there isn't necessarily a haste plateau per se, and I'm not sure quite what the minimum level would be to strive for. But I understand what he's talking about because, haste does seem a lot lower than it was in Cataclysm, and certainly for casting Cobra Shot or Steady Shot or it feels like it takes forever. I mean, it's a lot closer to the 2-second cast time than it is to say a 1.5 second cast time.
Yeah. Well, I think another element to this is that we're doing it a lot more. We spent a long time at the last, the Dragon's Ult patch, and that meant we spent a long time, a lot of us, with that set bonus that gave us double the focus per focus regen cast. I suspect that people combining the fact that they seem to be always out of focus and they're always casting this thing, combined with the fact that, yes, it does take a little bit longer, it just feels like a bit of a shock. However, if you'll remember, at the beginning of Cataclysm, we had, fairly slow Cobra shots and steady shots, even then. There's also been times that we were hard casting aim shot. That's even worse. It's your auto shots, and you can't move in aspect of the Fox. So, yes, rest assured, all of your gear levels are going to go up over time. If you're 473 now, by the time you're like 525 or 550 or whatever it is that we get in the next couple of patches, eventually you'll be used to the old one, and then the new ones will feel faster. But I don't find it that bad. I like having to plan a little bit in terms of am I going to be able to complete this thing without having something come off cooldown that needs focus. It's a lot more. It leaves a lot more opportunity for people to be exceedingly good or exceedingly bad, I suppose. But really, it gives an opportunity for skilled hunters to really be stand out that much more. But that said, yes, the haste certainly does feel slower right now. And the other thing you mentioned with the plateaus, I personally think that our rotation is so dynamic now, at least in Beastmaster and Survival, that there are no more real haste plateaus. There are times that having a certain amount of haste will make your rotation feel smoother, and it'll make you have less collisions between competing interests. But that's not something you can really math out, and it really depends on when things proc and stuff like that. Especially because so many of our procs are, haste based and random. At least, depending on the spec, of course. But I think that, I think that more haste is always better, but trust the sims. If your sim is telling you, mastery or crit or something is better than haste, then, try it in all different scenarios. But usually those things are pretty accurate.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. So our next question is from Dome Splitter. For a BM hunter, once he's hit or experience capped, should he consider reforging into mastery instead of haste? That is, if I can't put it into crit. You want to take this one?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think mastery and haste, I remember we talked about something like this a few shows back, and for beast mastery, all the secondary stats are very, very, very close within each other. So I think mastery is probably a good choice. Just because of the pet damage, extra pet damage you do. But I bet my suspicion is if you were to do haste, you probably wouldn't see a noticeable difference between the two. But I think reforge for it to get hit and expertise capped is what's recommended, and then crit would be the next best choice after that. And like I said, I don't think you can go wrong with either mastery or haste. I would probably give mastery a look though, just because it's definitely going to influence the pet that way.
Yeah, and the other thing to remember is that it's going to depend on a certain level of it. It's going to, if the DPS that you do is virtually identical, indistinguishable, unless you were to do 100 parses with identical gear, at that point you have to decide: would you rather have your pet hitting harder, or would you rather have a more fluid rotation? Because the higher your haste is, the faster your Cobra shots. And the other possible thing to consider is if you've already got a lot of haste, maybe you're a Cobra shot, maybe you're always being focus capped now, and you have to dump with a lot more arcane shots, and at that point maybe mastery would be better. So it really, it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. At least that's what it's supposed to be. So if you like one more than the other, use that. So the last Q&A that we've received so far is from Steerheart with a very interesting idea. We have practiced every other buff. We have practically every other buff in the game. When will we get a pet that can serve as a summoning stone?
Excellent question. Yeah, we don't have a summoning ability, do we? And that would be probably a good thing to have, especially since that awesome guild ability, have group will travel is gone and sorely missed by everybody.
Oh god, that thing was so much fun. Do you remember the first time we used it as a guild?
I do. I remember we were at Bastion at Twilight, and one of our encounters was like those elementals. The boss right before Cho'Gall, it bugged out on us, and the door into the room was closed, and we couldn't get through back in there to do another attempt. So we had some folks fly over to Orgrimmar into Garrosh's room, and then we summoned everybody for a surprise attack on Garrosh.
It was bonked. He just, as soon as he saw that the doors were bugged, he kind of made a judgment call, and he said, "Okay, I'm gonna rush off and stealth into Org and see if it turns out that we end up needing a summon to Org, I'll be here. And if it turns out that the doors just magically open because of a zone reset or something, then I'll be able to get a summon back." But in the end, we weren't able to unstick the doors, and it was right near the end of the raid night anyways, and everybody had one last attempt in them. We were sitting there looking at this door, and we're like, you know what? Nuts to this. Let's go kill Garrosh. And he's like, well, guess where I am? And we all got a summon to Garrosh's room. And, of course, as in the beginning of Cataclysm, he just wiped the floor with us. He did not need help of any of the players. We weren't wearing PvP gear. It wouldn't have mattered. He was just ripping through us. This is right when they buffed all of the bosses, and as a 25% or 10%, no, it was 25. We just didn't stand a chance, especially not with our fairly brand new 85s at the time. That was a lot of fun. Yeah, I wish we had a pet that we could summon with. Which one do you think that would make sense? Because some pets have multiple abilities, like
camels.
Foxes have play.
It should be camels, and it should be called Caravan, and just everybody rides in on a caravan of camels or horses.
Well, but summoning is disappearing one place and appearing someplace else. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah,
but
spectral camels.
No, I mean the Warp
Spectral
Stalker. I
Fury.
don't know what the Warp Stalker's ability is now, but that would be the one I would choose. I would get a Warp Stalker and have him
That
do
is
the,
a good
the
idea.
summoning.
Yeah, that makes all kinds of sense. Just like the longest warp stalk ever. Maybe they could even do something where a different kind of summoning where you give a warp stalker. Oh, this would be ripe for abuse. Give a warp stalker like a place that he remembers, and then you can just any friendly character can use that warp stalker to go to that place. Of course, my warp stalker's favorite place would be an org. And maybe that's a bad idea. No, I like the idea of a summoning stone, like a little mobile summoning stone. And you know what? The Warlock summoning stone is boring. It's stupid. It looks like a TV. It just stands there, or it looks like a big an old fashioned thing that you put your clothes in. What's the word I'm looking for? Not cabinet.
A wardrobe.
Wardrobe. That's it.
It looks like a wardrobe
Yeah.
calendar. Yeah.
Yeah, if they gave one of our pets the ability to summon people, or to I would have my pet. I'd be using the move to command, and people would be chasing it, trying to keep their summons active. It would it would be awesome. Yeah. Okay. Warp Stalker is one potential pet. I'm thinking something a little bit more monolithic. Maybe they could give us like a special utility pet that did nothing but stuff like this, and put it on a cooldown.
Yeah,
This
that could
and,
work.
like-
I'm just trying to think what else is out there. Like Warp Stalker is definitely my choice. I'm just looking at some of the pets here. I mean, Core Hounds already have the Ancient Hysteria. I don't know why I feel like they would be suitable for getting that job done, but they're other than no one really uses Core Hounds.
Yeah, that's right. I think we would need to have some sort of pet that kind of feels magic-y, something that it's kind of plausible that it'd be able to teleport some person.
I mean, you could give it.
I guess Warp Stalker.
The Spore Bat, the almighty Spore Bat. There's nothing nothing that it should not be able to do. I mean, Spirit Beast maybe, but I mean, Spirit Beasts already have their abilities. So yeah, I'm at a loss. I mean, I think Warp Stalker is the way to go.
I think you're right. That's the only one that has a teleport already, so that just kind of makes sense. So you could just kind of instead of teleport to behind the enemy, teleport whoever to behind the Warp Stalker. Yeah, that makes sense. Hey, that question before about reforging got me thinking about something. What do you use an add-on to calculate your reforging stuff in game, or do you use Zahara's sheet to optimize?
So there's a couple of add-ons that I've tried. I know a lot of people like Reforged Lite, I think is what it's called, and there's another one called Reforginator. I know Reforginator really makes things easy. I've had better luck. There's a site out there called WoWReforge.com. I like to use that site. It seems to be updated now for Mists of Pandaria, and anytime I get new gear, I'll load that up, load my character into that, and then it'll usually give you like 4 or 5 options to reforge your stats.
Yeah, I used to use them all the time.
So, and I found that to be, I had Reforginator add-on, and I went and looked at Reforginator's recommendations, and then I compared that to what I was getting out of WoW Reforged. I thought WoW Reforged just did a much better job at coming up with recommendations for what I needed to reforge. So I've been using that, and again, I mainly just use it for the crit and expertise. And since I'm a dwarf, I have to adjust it because my expertise cap is slightly lower. It's like 2,210 instead of like the 2,250 needed to get capped. So I plugged those values in there, and then I kind of let it interpret, what it thinks I should reforge into after that, and usually go with that. And usually it's pretty straightforward. It's like, all right, once you're hitting expertise capped, it tries to dump as much into crit as it can. And honestly, right now with my gear, there's usually not much room to do anything other than crit, hit, and expertise. There's not a lot left over for one of the other secondary stats, to be honest with you.
Yeah, going back to one of the earlier questions about haste, that's characteristic of the first few tiers of gear in any expansion, is that they feel a little bit anemic compared to the, what the new scaling of the stats really gives us. So, we feel like that our casts take forever. We don't see as many crits as we're used to, and that's because we go straight from the last tier of gear in the last expansion to the first tier of gear in the new expansion. And they didn't used to do quite as hard a reset on like crit scaling and stuff, but they've started to now. I guess because they realize every single time, we would have basically one or two expansions left until everybody was at 100% crit all the time, and that just wouldn't be fun. So,
Right.
But
And that's
I remember.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I remember when I hit 90, I was wearing just garbage. And I felt like everything was just so painful and just long and tedious. And the second I went into the auction house and I just basically purchased my, equivalent to 5-man's stuff, you just go buy a whole bunch of PvP gear and a couple of 463 blues, like, oh, well, this feels a lot better. It was just the difference of a couple of eye levels and quality levels, and all of a sudden everything felt like it was more smooth. And then when I got my first set of raid gear, everything feels even more smooth. And I imagine the second set of raid gear, this will just keep progressing until we get to the last tier in this expansion. At which point we'll be like, yeah, okay, this is going to be hard to get. It's going to be hard to get used to not having this, which is what happens every expansion.
Yeah, exactly. And then back to what we were saying about crit. And where it is and how that something like stat like that gets better with gear. And that's part of what makes that Dark Moon Fair trinket so good for hunters, that Relic of Zune, because it procs off critical hits. So as we get better gear and as our crit rating goes up, that trinket actually becomes a lot more effective than what it is up. And it's really good as it is now, even with like the lower crit levels. I find that thing's pretty amazing.
And those things are cheap now, eh?
What are they going for on the AH? I mean, last time I looked,
30K.
They were like around 50K. I saw one by a certain Euripides that was going for like almost 100K. I don't know if you ever sold that
no,
or not.
That was my way of saying I have not yet done a raid. Until I do a raid, I'm going to store this thing in the auction house so I'm not tempted to equip it. And I am not willing to let go of this for anything less than a small fortune. And nobody was willing to pay one. So I'm like, all right, I'm equipping it. I bought it to use it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you are using it now. I mean, it's totally worth using. It's just about as good as you can find, I think, right now. I think most lists I have it as really either the second or third best trinket this tier. I mean, it's top worst, it's top 3. And the only two things that might be better are heroic trinkets that drop out of the current rates, so it's not like the normal mode trinkets. We're talking heroic level trinkets.
Since Frost isn't here to make fun of me about going off topic like this, I may as well take a couple of moments to give you guys some tips if you don't have one and you want it. When I said they're 30K, that's just an average price. It really depends on your realm. In case you don't know, these Dark Moon cards are a world in and of themselves, especially for my other show, Call to Auction. We spend a lot of time talking about them because that's a big way of producing money. But if you're just looking to get one and you don't play the auction house and you don't care about gold, there's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can buy the trinket, you can buy the deck, or you can buy the cards. If you buy the cards, you need to put them together into a deck, which starts a quest that you can turn in in Dark Moon Island for a trinket of your choice. As long as I say choice, but I mean it's like in our case it's no choice. It's just agility, Relic of Zune. But I think is the strength one on the same deck as ours? I forget.
Yes, it is.
Okay, yeah. So in that case, the deck that you want to buy is the one that gives you strength or agility. And
it's a Tiger's deck.
Tiger's deck, that's right. You choose which deck you want, which relic you want when you turn in your quest. That said, you cannot create the deck out of cards if you don't have a 90. A level 90 character has to right-click on one of those cards, and that'll create the deck. And you can't turn the deck in, you can't turn that quest in and collect your trinket unless it happens to be the week of the fair. That fair happens every month. It's 1 week. That means there are 3 weeks out of every month that you cannot turn in one of those cards. If you need to buy it, go ahead.
As say, and if you're not aware, the fair is going on right now as of today. So most people listening this through iTunes, the fair is over. So if you didn't get your, but for those of you, last day. But for those of you listening live, today is the last day for the month of November, and the next one won't be in town until December 2nd. Which I imagine that has a big influence on the pricing right now and what it'll be. It'll be a much different picture next week, I'm sure.
Absolutely, and that's what I was going to get to, is if you want a trinket right now, just buy whatever's cheapest, cards, a deck, or the trinket. If you want a trinket next week, your only choice, if you need that trinket immediately, is to buy the trinket. The trinket that was already turned into the agility, not the strength one. Also, that means that you're going to have sort of a captive market. You will be the captive market for some scribe somewhere, and he knows that he does not need to let that thing go cheap, because if you're desperate enough, And of course, this may not apply to you, but the other people that might consider buying this, some of them might be desperate enough for a trinket that they are willing to pay this premium and wish that they had bought it the week before. However, sometimes, the scribes under or overestimate demand, and sometimes, production does not change. Every scribe on every realm can produce one card per day, unless they're willing to use those things the motes of harmony or whatever. So generally, most scribes only produce one per day because the scribe cooldown, the research cooldown, is what they use to make these cards. That said, that means that the number of cards being created and the number of decks being created is pretty much fixed. And that also means that, while some scribes may only create decks during the fair, some of them are going to continue creating cards and decks throughout the month. And that means the 3 weeks that the decks can't be traded in, those 3 weeks, sometimes you can get a deck that starts the quest that you won't be able to use until the next fair, but you can get a deck for cheap. Now, if you're looking for some benchmark prices, look at the price of a stack of herbs. Fool's Cap right now. I think I remember Steed, the co-host on Call to Auction, telling me that something like 52 or 62 stacks of Fool's Cap is what it takes to make a deck. That's including the
62.
cooldown. 62, thank you. That's including the mats that you need to do the cooldown, and it's including the 10 starlight inks that you need, starlight or ink of dreams, whatever, the expensive inks, starlight ink that you need to make the cards. So it's 13 per card, and then that's assuming that you're making a deck every 13 to 15 cards, which is not true if you're just doing it on your own. You have to be trading to get that kind of ratio. So long story short, if you want a deck, you can either buy the cards, make a deck, and then wait for the fair. You can buy the deck, wait for the fair, or you can buy the trinket. And depending, and I'm going to be posting something about this on WoW Insider eventually, but depending on which method you go and when you do it, you might pay a lot less money. So, and it's not like it's going to go down in price over time. And as far as I know, the trinket's going to retain its value. It's currently top 3. It'll probably be top 5 next patch, and it'll continue. It won't lose its value as quickly as other ones because it's based on crits.
Yeah, and like I said, it's a very, very good trinket. I ended up buying individual cards like a week or two, maybe 2 weeks out.
What did you?
I ended up paying about $22,000 overall for my set. So I didn't think that was. I thought that was a pretty good deal. Like I said, I just scoured the auction house, looked for cards, looked for as low prices I could find, and I figured that was probably a good time to do it. Because the fair was still far enough out that it really wasn't on the forefront of everybody's mind, and so people just might be trying to unload those cards. Even then, the price for the cards was like I said, I paid like $22,000 for mine. But if I wanted to buy a deck, that was up around $40,000, and at that time, trinkets were up around $50,000. And it's like, part of me was very tempted to like, I should just either convert this to a deck and sell that, make some money. It seemed like there was some money-making opportunities. Obviously, you had to have the gold on hand to make those purchases, but still.
It's ridiculous. If you want to see the overall average prices for your realm, go to the Undermine Journal. Just look up one of the cards or one of the decks and just look at the price and availability and correlate that to the Darkmoon Fair. And it's ridiculous. It's like a license to print money. You buy cards or you buy decks between fairs, and you sell relics during the fair. The only thing is you got to make sure not to get stuck with inventory that goes past that fair, because each fair, the value of everything is going down dramatically, because even though there's a lot of demand, these cards are being churned out at an amazing rate. It's like every scribe everywhere, and I know people like Steed that have many scribes with many cooldowns.
Yeah, and I think this is the second, maybe the third fair of the expansion. No, probably the second fair.
I did the same thing. It is, and I did the same thing as you. I went and I bought cards. I turned them into a deck, and I ended up paying $45,000, and I had mine at the first.
Yep.
And then I didn't have an eye level. Even with that, I didn't have an eye level high enough for our raids for like 3 more weeks. So it's kind of sitting there going, "Well, that was a lot of money I could have saved," but whatever.
But yeah, so I was very, very, very pleased with its performance thus far. I mean, it was probably one of the smarter things. I'll be interested to see, and I don't think you'll be able to do this, but patch 5.1 introduces the ability to upgrade items with Valor, and I don't know if trinkets are going to be on the list of things you can upgrade if it's
I'm
just
crossing my
weapons or
fingers.
armor. But that's it. If you can bump this thing up 4 levels, which would be the maximum you could for the epic items, even though typically with trinkets, especially with this one, it's an eye level 476, but as we can see, you kind of throw it out the window based on the procs and things that the trinkets do. So I would just imagine bumping this up 4 eye levels would really put this thing into another tier.
I'm crossing my fingers so hard my knuckles hurt. So can you explain to me this upgrade system, or to anybody else that might be listening who hasn't read the post yet?
Yeah, so basically you're starting in 5.1. They're not going to introduce any more new gear per se that you could buy with Valor. And what they're going to do is give you the ability to upgrade the item level on some of your gear by spending Valor. And I think it's going to be like that you can do a maximum of 4 levels per epic item, and I think it's 8 levels for the heroic blues. So you could turn a 463 into
471.
was it a 471, I guess, which is okay. I mean, it's not horrible, but it's not the best either. But again, that's only going to cost you justice points, which there's really nothing to spend on justice points. But for most of you who are raiding, there's going to be no need to do that.
Yeah, not for the blues.
No, but it's a nice thing
You say
if you're leveling up, though.
What
if you're
happens if I buy and I remember I was getting borderline hate tells from one of the hunters in our raid when he saw the ring that I was wearing, because I bought it off the black market auction house. He's like, that boss isn't even released yet. How much did you pay for that? And I'm like, $40K, I think. He's like, just like, what?
What ring was that you were wearing?
I don't remember. It's a 510 heroic ring.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. Well, it's the only reason I can raid with you guys. I think I'm still wearing 430 blue bracers or something, and like half my crap's PvP. With these goddamn dailies, I just don't have time to do anything. It's ridiculous. Anyways, I'm going to rant about that later.
But I think it's going to cost like 750 per Valor points just to upgrade a single item. So it's not something you're going to...
By one eye level or by the amount that you just mentioned?
I want to say maybe it's either 1 or 2 eye levels. Maybe it's 2 eye levels.
And you can do that more than once?
Right. I'd have to... Let me pop over to MMO Champion. And again, this is sort of preliminary. It's something they're trying out on the PTR. So I don't know that the values are 100% set in stone.
Thanks. I see. Yeah, and that's the reason I brought up my store-bought heroic. It wasn't to brag or anything. It's the question. If it's 510 now, what's the maximum eye level I can get to by upgrading it?
Yeah, it would be 514, basically.
Okay, so there's no difference between different types of epics. All epics can go up 4 so far. Okay.
Exactly. It seems like it's going to be a fixed maximum.
All right.
Okay, so here I'm just looking at it now. So for Valor points, 750 Valor points, you can upgrade it 4 item levels, and it says maximum number of upgrades would be 2.
So 8 total.
Well, it's either I'm trying to understand that it's either 8 total or 4 total. 8 total would be nice.
I think 8 total would make more sense because that's almost a whole tier. And then so you can upgrade it twice, either 4 or 8 total, and then is it 750 per upgrade, no matter which slot?
Yeah, 750 for upgrade.
Okay, so clearly you're going to want to do your chest, your weapon, your shoulders, your helm first.
Yeah, so it's 8 total. Okay, yeah. So here's what they show. So let's say you have an item level 495, item level 489 piece of gear. For 750 Valor, you can bump that up to 493, and then for 750 more Valor, you could bump that up to 497.
I see. Oh, that makes sense. Well, that's pretty good.
So essentially, you can bump it up about a half a tier, I guess. Because, 489 is what you get from Oshugan Vaults. 496 is the item level from Heart of Fear and Terrace of the Endless Spring, or whatever it's called.
Okay.
Right, and that's just for the normal level gear. And obviously, so 750 doesn't sound like a lot, but when you can only earn 1,000 per week.
Yeah, that is a lot.
it kind of gates you from. I mean, obviously, 750 sounds low relative to what you're paying to buy actual pieces of gear, which are $1,250 at the low end and $2,250 at the high end. But like I said, you're gated by the 1,000 Valor cap, the 1,000 Valor per week. So it's not like you're going to be able to upgrade each and every piece of gear in a short amount of time. It'd be a lengthy process to upgrade your set. So, it's going to be, you're going to have to pick and choose which items you're going to want to do. And I would think weapons for hunters would be, your ranged weapon would be a premium. That would be the one of the first items you would focus on. Like I said, I don't know if it'll be applied to trinkets or not, but you'll be able to do this with PvP gear as well, by the way. This isn't limited just to PvE stuff.
Yep.
So you'll be able to use your conquest points and your honor points as well.
I guess honor on the blue stuff, conquest on the epic stuff.
Correct.
Okay. Fair enough. That's an interesting system. I wonder how they're going to handle season. Like if we go to the next season after this, let's say you buy all your epic stuff through arenas, and then, with they have conquest cap every week, and then, you keep capping conquest, you keep upgrading your stuff, and then they close the season, open a new one. Is that like all your work is gone? You starting over from nothing? Or obviously you can still use the gear, but can you do an upgrade to get your existing gear to the level of the next season, or do you have to go buy the next season's gear and start all over again?
I don't know.
I'll bet you it's going to be a reset. I think they like the idea of you having a very minor advantage every season. Like every time they introduce a new season, they want to make it so that anybody can walk in, earn honor, and then start. They don't have to feel like they're missing out on a huge portion of it because they didn't play last season. So,
right, and I imagine they'll do that with the Valor too. Like once the new tier comes out, they'll reset everybody's Valor points to 0 because they don't want you going in there and buying a piece of gear or doing a massive amount of upgrading right away. Although, I don't know.
Well,
if
you're capped at 1,000 per week, but aren't you capped at? I thought I read 4,000 total. You can't get over 4,000.
3,000 total for your Valor.
3,000.
But if you're allowing you to just upgrade existing items, then there may not be any harm in letting you carry it over into the next tier if they're not introducing new items, right? I don't know. Have to see how it plays out. In other words, that 3,000 Valor you have in your bank the day before the new tier comes out isn't worth any more or less when the new tier comes out if you're only going to be able to do it to upgrade existing items.
Yeah.
So.
Hey, I got a question. When did we start the show? It was a few minutes late, right?
It was. So do you want to go over a couple emails that we've got?
I'm thinking maybe just one.
Okay.
Because I have to get going for real life reasons soon. I'll read this one here. The one that you tagged for me from Cole. So he sends us a question asking about level 90 talents and stampedes. Stampede. He has been scouring the WHU, but he can't find a specific recommendation for the level 90s. Basically, he's using Barrage, and he's doing more damage than other similarly geared hunters who use Glaive Toss. Why are they using Glaive Toss? Is it better? Now, this is one of the first of his two questions. Now, I'm going to hark back to an earlier episode where BRK pointed out Glaive Toss is the only one that's controllable. Glaive Toss, you know where it's going to go, you know what it's going to hit, and it may not do as much damage, but it's seeming out to be pretty close. And, Barrage, as an example, is something that will occasionally, like you were saying, Darkbrew, you have to disengage to behind them and then fire backwards so you don't accidentally pull more trash. Sometimes it just pulls trash from who knows where. That's why. That said, if you're doing more damage than similarly geared hunters, there's a lot of potential reasons for that. And I don't think that your choice of level 90 talents is going to be a huge effect. Part of it's going to be, well, I suppose it could be, right? If you're facing a lot of AoE and they're not using Glaive Toss to its maximum efficiency by, picking something in the back to Glaive Toss to,
right.
Then you might be in a situation where you just have, the better equipped system for that. But if you're talking about on a boss, they should be pretty much even, and that's been simmed out. So maybe your rotation is better, maybe your gear is better, or even though it's the same quality, yours is better reforged or better picked or something. So or just you could just have a better grasp of the rotation and focus management. So that's the kind of thing that would make a bigger deal.
Yeah, I would just say this too. Just sort of look at it situationally. If there's any fight where you got a lot of ads to deal with, Barrage might be a little bit better. But the thing to remember about Barrage is it's a 3-second channeled ability. So if you've started that channel and all of a sudden a big purple glob pops up underneath your feet and you've got to move, you've got to move and you've got to interrupt that channel and you'll lose out on DPS. So Glaive Toss is just an instant ability with a relatively short cooldown. So I think in most situations that's going to be preferred.
Well, the relatively short cooldown is a disadvantage in my opinion because I'm always, like Frost was saying, the more things you have popping into your cooldown, into your rotation, I should say, the less good it is. These global cooldowns are starting to limit us in terms of what we can do. So, you want to read the second part of his question?
Yeah, and he said the second question, we want to pop all of our cooldowns at once for a multiplied bonus, but do we want to pop Bestial Wrath during our Stampede? Because if our main pet's damage is reduced by 25% and Bestial Wrath boosts it by 20%, isn't it still doing 5% damage? Hence, would it be better to use Stampede before your other CDs, Rapid Fire, Bestial Wrath, Link's Rush, and unused trinkets? So after the Stampede is over, you can stack your Focus Fire along with your other CDs. What do you all think? Thank you. When he says, and by the power of Frost's uncommonly good-looking wrist hair, may the show live on.
That's special. Uncommonly good-looking wrist hair. Nice. That is a good question. Yeah, it is well groomed. He's got a special comb. I saw it in his bathroom when we were doing episode 100. Okay, so the question is if you obviously we want to try and multiply our bonuses for cooldowns whenever possible. Bestial Wrath is not like one of our cooldowns as Stampede actually reduces the damage for our pet. Bestial Wrath increases the damage for our pet. Don't those kind of cancel each other out? I guess Bestial Wrath, I'm pretty sure it doesn't affect the other pets that you've got. It doesn't affect your Stampede clones, does it?
No, it does not. It doesn't apply to them.
Yeah, so, really Bestial Wrath is more about focus reduction. I mean, the damage is nice, and it's part of the cooldown, but it's better to stack Bestial Wrath with a speed increase. And I think more to the point, it doesn't matter whether you stack it with Stampede or something else. If you have an on-use cooldown that increases your agility, for example, like or even just a proc that is going to go off. Like if you pre-pot and then your trinket goes off, and then we blow Heroism, you should absolutely hit Rapid Fire, hit Bestial Wrath, and hit Stampede, because all the other stuff going on is going to affect your Stampede. And even though the Stampede isn't directly benefiting from Bestial Wrath, like your other pets don't get it. It's not like it's taking anything away. The 20%, the 25% reduction to your pet's damage, it's irrelevant. That's balanced, baked into Stampede, regardless of what. So it's not like you're blowing Bestial Wrath. It's not like blowing it later would gain you anything. In fact, you're going to lose something because you're no longer getting out on all your procs lining up with the heroism. So that's, in my opinion, the best. Now, if you're talking about what to do later on in the fight, because Bestial Wrath comes off cooldown every 90 seconds or something.
Yeah, every 1 minute, basically.
Every 1 minute, yeah. So, what you want to do then is basically try and line it up with times that you have a little bit more haste. But aside from that, just make sure you never have fire less than the highest possible number of them per fight, and that means that you can never wait for longer than a combined of 90 seconds or less. Like if you think that you're going to get a proc in a couple of seconds, you delay by 10 seconds, and then you hit it, that's fine. If you do it again, that's fine. But if you do it a third time, you're risking the possibility that the boss will die right before you would have hit it at the last one, thereby costing yourself a bit of DPS. So it's worth min-maxing to an extent, but because it comes off cooldown so frequently, I would just hit it as soon as it's up.
Well, Bestial Wrath, Bestial Wrath is something I think you just use on cooldown. It's like something like Stampede, you really have to pay attention to the encounter and how long that encounter is. That's something I was just doing a little bit before the show, is kind of going through a log saying, well, how long are our fights now? So I'm just trying to determine whether or not I have time to, should I pop everything in the beginning, and is it going to come off cooldown in time for me to use it again? And not just use it again, but in a meaningful way. Like, you don't want to have it come off cooldown 2 seconds before the boss dies. That's not helpful
No,
to
not
me
so much.
or the raid. So, you have to pay. And there are some fights that are like, where we're killing them in like 5 minutes and 31 seconds. And so it's a very small window with which you would, have to possibly use it a second time. But I would say this, like Rapid Fire and Stampede as a combination are very useful together. If for no other reason than that Rapid Fire is going to increase the focus regen of all those pets that you have out, and they're going to be able to hit harder and do more and more of their abilities in that span of time.
Yep.
So,
So I think that's the answer. We should probably go ahead and do our outro, and I know I can't stay for a post-show today, but if you can, you're welcome to.
No, that's it for me too. So.
All right. Well, you have been listening to episode 150 of the Hunting Party Podcast. This is Euripides from FDPS, WoW Insider, and the Call to Auction Podcast.
And I'm Dark Brew from thebrewhall.com and the Brew Hall on Twitter.
And I'm Molly Sonder from the Hunting Party Podcast.
We are on iTunes. Who stole my line back? We are on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, and we have an RSS feed. So if you want, you can find all of those links on the show notes.
Also, if you like us, please don't be shy about leaving us a review on iTunes or YouTube, especially one where you mention how many spore bats you keep stabled or how uncommonly hairy Frostheim's arms are. You can submit a title.
Just read it.
I read everything. You can submit a title for this week's show by emailing us at huntingpartypodcast@gmail.com and have your name mangled on air by professionals.
Or by us.
Well, I didn't say
We are
professional what.
Yeah, professional name manglers. That's what we are.
All right,
Hey,
stay
I did
thirsty,
pretty
my
well.
You did better than Frost did with those names. I mean, and a lot of them show up every week that they should just roll off our tongues naturally, but they don't. All right, stay thirsty, my friends. Remember to drink your dark brew lager.
Don't forget to spare new to your feral druid.
Or the Horde. And don't forget
And Ro-
to pay your dues.
There you go. Someone had to say it. All right. And that's a wrap. Snap it.
That's a wrap. We'll see you next
All right.
week.
Viper to cheetah to dragon hawk. No time to waste, cause I can jump shot. BM, MM, and SV. I can rock out any tree. Never worried about my threat, cause I've got FD and misdirect. Catching loose mobs in my traps. I never miss, cause I am hit capped. Cause I'm the hunter, not the marked. I'm the fighter, not the spark. I'm the kiter, not the kite. I'll top the meters every fight. Rated end game, dealing death. Just me, my gun, and my trusty bed. Now let's begin with Illidan, Osirian, and Kil'jaeden, Magdamar, Asgalor, Gruul, Cthulhu, and Razorgore, Onyxia to Ragnarok.